Tonight, impeachment on motion. South Korea's opposition lawmakers begin impeachment proceedings against President over his failed attempt to impose martial law. Cyber espionage. US says Salt Typhoon Chinese hacking group behind major metadata theft. Dozens of telecoms providers around the world have been targeted. Panic in Manhattan. United Healthcare CEO shot and killed outside New York City hotel. Police search for suspect in targeted attack. And the Tree of Gold. Europe's most expensive Christmas tree made up of 2,000 Vienna Philharmonic coins goes on display in Munich. All that and more as World News Tonight starts right now.
This is Derana World News Tonight.
A very good evening and welcome to World News Tonight. We are here to bring you key stories across the globe for this Thursday, and we begin today with some regional updates. With South Korea being under duress, the impeachment process against the president is now in motion, with the opposition party's impeachment motion reported to the National Assembly.
A motion to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol over his short-lived martial law declaration, proposed by the 6 opposition parties, including the Democratic Party, was reported to the National Assembly during Thursday's plenary session, with the ruling People Power Party not in attendance. The impeachment motion against President Yoon accuses him of disrupting constitutional order by suspending the National Assembly's functions and violating political freedoms by banning party activities. This marks the 3rd impeachment motion against a sitting president in South Korea's constitutional history. Under the National Assembly Act, the motion must be reported in the first plenary session after its proposal, and the vote must take place between 24 and 72 hours after that. A vote on the motion can take place as early as 12:49 a.m. on Friday. The opposition plans to hold the impeachment vote as soon as possible. According to the National Assembly Act, to pass, the motion needs the support of 2/3 of the National Assembly or 200 votes. With the opposition holding 192 seats, at least 8 PPP members would need to support it for it to move to the Constitutional Court. If it passes, President Yoon will be suspended from his duties immediately. The PPP said it has officially decided to oppose the motion, adding that it will decide how to respond, including whether to skip the plenary session once the voting date is set. Meanwhile, candlelit protests continued on Thursday across the country, with participants calling for the president's resignation.
Meanwhile, the South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol named a new defense minister after accepting the resignation of the outgoing minister Kim Yong-hyun, who claimed responsibility for the declaration of martial law.
On Wednesday, Yoon's chief of staff announced that former ambassador to Saudi Arabia Choi Byung-hyuk was chosen to head the Ministry of National Defense. A former Army general, Choi also holds a master's degree in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College. The top office says Choi is the right candidate based on his extensive experience and deep expertise in defense, and would ensure the military fulfills its duties effectively, maintaining a robust readiness posture grounded in the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Now, this came a day after the former defense minister offered to resign, saying the mobilized armed forces had been acting under his direction and that he was solely responsible for the events. All ministry appointments must be approved by the National Assembly.
A senior U.S. official said a large number of Americans' metadata has been stolen in the sweeping cyber espionage campaign carried out by a Chinese hacking group called Salt Typhoon. The official declined to provide specific figures, but noted that China's access to America's telecommunications infrastructure was broad and that the hacking was ongoing.
The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, millions of Americans could potentially be impacted by a massive Chinese hacking and espionage campaign. Authorities now say at least 8 American telecommunications giants were compromised as part of a recently discovered global hacking operation. The news coming as ABC News learned U.S. authorities suspect the data of hundreds of thousands of U.S. mobile phone users was stolen, with more than 1 million unsuspecting consumers likely affected. According to the FBI, the Chinese government stole a large amount of data, including who the phone users were talking to, when they spoke, and where they were communicating from. In some cases, the Chinese hackers were able to read text messages and to actually listen in on conversations of a small group of high-profile Americans. But officials today also acknowledging the massive privacy implications for so many average Americans. Tonight, they're urging consumers to use encrypted apps for their communications, including text messages and voicemail recording.
Let's go for a short commercial break now. More world news on the other side. On the road to the White House now. President-elect Donald Trump is asking a Georgia appeals court to throw out the criminal charges he's facing in the state for seeking to subvert the 2020 election. If the case is thrown out, it would end the only lingering criminal case against him that hasn't gone to trial.
Lawyers for Trump argued that his continued prosecution by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis would violate the U.S. Constitution as he prepares to return to the White House next month. His lawyers also argued that continuing to prosecute him would undermine his ability to govern. They urged the appeals court to remove Trump from the proceedings and to order a lower court judge to dismiss the case against Trump in its entirety. The other co-defendants can continue to press their appeal if Trump is removed from the case. A spokesperson for Willis did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Trump and 14 others face racketeering and other charges in Georgia for allegedly forming a criminal conspiracy to reverse Trump's narrow defeat in the battleground state in the 2020 election. Trump has pleaded not guilty and has argued that the case and others he has faced were politically motivated attempts to damage his campaign. Federal prosecutors have already dropped 2 criminal cases against Trump based on a Justice Department policy against prosecuting a sitting president.
Brian Thompson, CEO of United Health's insurance division, was shot and killed near a Midtown Manhattan hotel in what authorities believe was a targeted attack. A gunman who investigators say was waiting for some time before Thompson's arrival at a company event being held at the same hotel opened fire from 20 feet away, firing multiple times, striking Thompson.
Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Health's insurance unit, was fatally shot in the chest on Wednesday outside a hotel in New York. Police said the shooting happened in front of the Hilton in Midtown Manhattan, and Thompson was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital.
In Midtown Manhattan early this morning, 50-year-old Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot and killed in what appears, at this early stage of our investigation, to be a brazen, targeted attack. This does not appear to be a random act of violence. Many people passed the suspect, but he appeared to wait for his intended target.
Police were still searching for the suspect, who fled on foot wearing a black face mask and a gray backpack. United Health Group was hosting a scheduled investor event at the hotel on Wednesday. But Chief Executive Andrew Whitty took the stage about 1 hour after its start to announce it was canceling the remainder of the program. Thompson was named CEO of United Healthcare's insurance unit in April 2021, after working at the company since 2004 in several departments. According to the company's website, United Healthcare did not respond to a request for comment.
2 kindergarten students remain in extremely critical condition after they were wounded in a shooting at a school in California. The local police said a suspect was also found dead at the scene with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Authorities say a man is dead after opening fire on children at an elementary school in Butte County, California.
Shots fired, 27 Cox Lane between Highway 70 and Stimson Road.
The calls to police coming around 1 p.m., authorities racing to the scene. At the Feather River School of Seventh-day Adventists in Palermo, California, about 10 miles outside Oroville, officials say 2 students were shot and wounded, rushed to the hospital. One of them had to be airlifted. Authorities finding the suspected shooter near the playground, dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The small school of some 35 students put on lockdown. The children taken to a nearby church to reunite with their families.
Well, moving over to Israel, where the conflict persists despite the ceasefire deal, Norway's sovereign wealth fund has sold all its shares in Israel's Bezek in line with new ethics protocol that discourages investments in businesses that aid Israel's operations in the occupied Palestinian territories.
The firm provides telecom services to Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. The decision comes after the fund's ethics watchdog adopted a new, tougher interpretation of ethics standards. They apply to businesses that aid Israel's operations in the occupied Palestinian territories. The $1.8 trillion fund has been an international leader in the environmental, social and governance investment field. It owns 1.5% of the world's listed shares across 8,700 companies, and its size gives it influence. It's the latest decision by a European financial entity to cut back links to Israeli companies or those with ties to the country. Bezek, which is Israel's largest telecoms group, declined to comment. The watchdog said it noted that the company had said it was providing telecom services to Palestinian areas in the West Bank, but that it did not outweigh the fact that it was also providing services to Israeli settlements. The watchdog makes recommendations to the board of the Norwegian Central Bank, which has the final say on divestments. The fund has now sold all its stock in the company. Before that, it had cut its stake during the first half of the year, owning shares worth over $23 million at the end of June. Norway in May recognised Palestine as a state, joining others including Spain and Ireland.
Islamist-led Syrian rebels surrounded the key city of Hama from three sides as they continued their offensive on government-held territory. This marks the latest win for the rebels after last week's takeover of the country's second city, Aleppo, which in more than a decade of war had never completely fallen out of government hands.
Here, north of Aleppo, Islamist rebel forces fighting Bashar al-Assad's government triumph after a recent victory. Some residents of the Syrian city of Tel Rifat are now returning home after these armed opposition fighters demined the surrounding area. This man is elated to be granted safe return to reunite with his family.
On our way to Aleppo after more than 8 years, thank God.
But the current flare-up in fighting is driving thousands of Syrians from their homes. This UN official touring an internal displacement camp measures the catastrophic impact of the conflict between Hayat Tahrir al-Shams and pro-Assad forces. As many Syrians flee the escalating conflict, anti-Assad Islamists advance further south. On Tuesday, they arrived at the gates of Hama, the country's fourth largest city, prompting a government counteroffensive.
Meanwhile, countries expressed support for the Syrian government as it combats terrorism and called on the international community to unswervingly uphold the direction of political settlement.
At a UN Security Council meeting on Syria, Fu said China supports the Syrian-led and Syria-owned peace process that allows Syrian people to determine their country's future without external interference. The persistent Syria crisis stems from a variety of factors, said Fu, adding that China has consistently held that the political settlement is the only way out. He expressed hope the international community would earnestly respect Syria's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity. The representative said foreign troops must end their illegal presence in Syria and countries should immediately lift unilateral sanctions on Syria. The Chinese representative highlighted that attacks on Aleppo and Idlib by terrorist groups including Hayat Tahrir al-Sham have destroyed the overall peace and situation in recent years, and that China is deeply concerned that this new round of conflicts has brought new trouble. Fu also condemned occupation by armed terrorist elements in Iran's consulate general in northern Syria's Aleppo city. During the meeting, representatives of Russia and the US criticized each other for supporting terrorism. Russian permanent representative to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, said the US has no courage to condemn terrorist attacks against civilians in Aleppo. He added that he has no illusion about America combating terrorism. US Ambassador Robert Woods said the US has been fighting against terrorism for decades and will continue its fight, adding that the Russian representative is in no position to lecture on this issue.
French lawmakers voted to oust the government of Prime Minister Michel Barnier after just 3 months in office, a historic move which plunged the country further into political chaos.
Michel Barnier is no longer France's Prime Minister. The 73-year-old was ousted in a vote of no confidence in Parliament on Wednesday evening. Addressing French MPs beforehand, Barnier called the vote a moment of truth and responsibility. A majority of 331 lawmakers voted in favour of the motion. Barnier's leadership was called into question after he used special powers to push through his controversial budget without a vote on Monday. That led to an unlikely alliance between the radical left and the far right, who both tabled motions of no confidence after accusing Barnier of failing to listen to their demands. In a heated debate before the vote, the leader of the right-wing party, the Republicans, said the far right and the radical left were choosing chaos over responsibility. Barnier warned that ousting him would be catastrophic for state finances, as the country is struggling to tame a growing deficit. His fall from power is the latest turn in what has been a tumultuous few months for French politics. Appointed by President Emmanuel Macron in September, Barnier has been in a vulnerable position from the start. Snap parliamentary elections in June left the National Assembly without an absolute majority. Macron will address the nation on Thursday evening. He's expected to appoint a new Prime Minister very quickly, potentially as early as this weekend. But any new face will come across the same challenges as Barnier in a divided parliament. A political deadlock which looks set to continue, as France can't hold new parliamentary elections before July next year.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz vowed not to send peacekeeping troops into demilitarized zone in Ukraine if a ceasefire were to be agreed between Kiev and Moscow.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz battled questions from German MPs in the Bundestag on Wednesday, ahead of the vote of confidence that the Chancellor has called for December the 16th. Scholz has drawn the line at sending German soldiers into Ukraine after the foreign ministers suggested that peacekeeping troops could be stationed in a demilitarized zone if a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine was agreed. The Chancellor was grilled about the shrinking economy, which has continued to deteriorate over the past 3 years, while Scholz has been in power due to repercussions stemming from COVID and Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which have arguably been outside the government's control. While Scholz said that he would continue to work on policies over the next couple of months ahead of the vote scheduled for February, it's clear that he's already in full election campaign mode.
A short commercial break now, more world news on the other side. Welcome back. Human tissue samples from Oxford's Space Innovation Lab are in orbit on the International Space Station in the hope they will reveal why the aging process speeds up in space and whether aging-related diseases can be solved.
Humans age faster in space, and this new research may find out why. Scientists could also find ways to slow down age-related health issues, all without having to use astronauts. Human tissue samples from Oxford's Space Innovation Lab are in orbit on the International Space Station. Meanwhile, Dr. Ghada Al-Saleh is leading a team which observes identical cells on Earth. Decades of space travel have revealed how microgravity, the sensation of weightlessness, affects the human body, diminishing bone density and weakening the immune system. And Al-Saleh's goal is to discover methods of slowing age-related illness, whether someone is on Earth or up in space. Plans for missions to Mars and even beyond make finding a solution more important.
And finally tonight, German gold dealer Pro Aurum is calling its Christmas tree made of 2,000 gold coins Europe's most expensive one. The tree star is an even larger gold coin. According to the dealers, it's valued at $2.6 million.
This certainly isn't Charlie Brown's Christmas tree.
I'll take this little tree home and decorate it.
In fact, just the opposite. This one's made out of 2018 gold coins. The money sits in slots on the acrylic tree. And since no tree is complete without a star, of course, this one boasts an even larger gold coin. It's being called Europe's most expensive Tannenbaum. A German gold dealer named Pro Aurum and the Austrian Mint are responsible for the display, valued at 2.3 million euros, or about $2.6 million. Still, the dealer says the tree isn't as valuable as it could have been, since the value of gold dropped during the last half of the year. Workers wore white gloves to assemble it carefully and took more than an hour to put it up. The money tree will be up at Pro Arm's Munich Gold House until December 15th. Sort of proving money does grow on trees. No need to put anything under it. The tree itself is the gift.
And with that, we wrap up today's bulletin. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest updates from around the world. Stay tuned as we've got Anuradhi Vikramasinghe joining you next on the Nightly Business Report. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.